We're also very pleased to be joined by author, astrologer, and ceremonial leader Barbara Hand Clow in Santa Fe, whose book Trilogy predicted the 2020 crack in reality. Barbara, welcome. And please tell us, how did you know in 2010 that something as big as COVID would occur?
And was doing a lot of Mayan calendar research and wrote a book called The Mayan Code. And so when I came to the realization of what the end of the Mayan calendar meant, which was basically really the ending of a whole historical phase, probably again the 5,000-year phase, then I decided I got to do something different. I did a astrological study of the next 10 or 11 years, and much to my utter deep concern, I realized the world was going to crack in 2020. And so then I knew that in 2020, the systems that had been basically developed and operating for around 700 years were going to be going through a complete, utter transformation. What I wanted to do was track what happens when a reality disintegrates and falls apart. And so the trilogy, as it goes along over a period of 12 years, actually shows how reality started to disintegrate and then how it cracked in 2020. And what happened in 2020 in January, which was the period that I could see was the key, Saturn was conjunct Pluto, and the first COVID cases showed up. And so the agency for the world cracking ended up being the COVID-19.
Wow, interesting. And Barbara, tell us how you channeled your new book in the trilogy and how the economic changes that we're experiencing today harkens back to a similar astrological transit during the time of the Medicis in 13th century Florence, Italy.
The cycle in 2020 is the same cycle that occurred in 1285 AD. And back in 1285 AD is when the medieval economies and systems started to move into banking and started to move into more complex systems, especially the Vatican. When this other transit started, what I showed in the novel was the de' Medici family was one of the families that was very, very involved in that 700-year cycle, banking cycle and artistic cycle of power. And I couldn't resist it because it's such a fascinating, the whole de' Medici family is really fascinating. They go back really, really far. I think the Renaissance primarily can be explained astrologically. But as you know, and I know from studying various Renaissance characters, sure they were. They were very artistic. They were very much in touch with the muse. Like, for example, this trilogy wrote itself. I didn't write this trilogy. All I had to do was get out of the way and just sit in my chair with my finger on the keys, because it was coming through from some other reality and it needed to come through at this time.
Wow. Barbara, your grandfather was half Cherokee and he was a Cherokee Record Keeper. He passed the knowledge on to you. Explain what he said about the Cherokee and the connection with the Sephardic crypto Jews who fled the Inquisition and came to America.
What's interesting is my grandfather, Hand, was a Cherokee Record Keeper. He was the carrier of the tradition that goes back as far as they can go with their records, and he was a carrier. And then he passed the records to me, so I'm also a Cherokee Record Keeper. And so my grandfather, therefore, told me the whole story of time and the whole story of history and told me about a great cataclysm around 12,000 years ago that really changed our planet and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And then he told me about the journeying of our tribal people after the cataclysm. And he went back, 4,000 BC. He went way back in time. And the problem is the story that he told me didn't exist anywhere except him telling me. By 2011, a whole lot of the facts that I had that hadn't been verified yet started getting verified. What's been really exciting to me is that the genetic testing that has been going on for the last 10, 15 years, particularly by a man named Donald Yates, who does an excellent job. His genetic testing and analysis matched the story that my grandfather told me about where our people went. And that was just mind-boggling for me. I know that my particular branch of the Cherokee, we're basically, the genes are mostly Egyptian and they're mostly Sephardic Jews. They're not Ashkenazi Jews.
So fascinating. And meanwhile, you've written a lot about the Pleiadians in your career, believed to be a group of higher dimensional enlightened beings. Explain how the native Cherokee and Mayans are connected to the Pleiadian story.
So when I was a little girl, my grandfather taught me that I came from the Pleiades. Well, can you imagine the trouble that I got into when I was in first grade and the teacher said, "Where did you come from?" You're right, exactly. All the way through school, all the way through college and even graduate school, I kept a double data bank. So if I took a geology course, if I took a history course, I wrote it in the margins of all the books that I had, the real story. So I didn't lose the story, even though my education tried to destroy the story. Didn't work. I held on to it. Cataclysm that occurred 12,000 years ago, the fall of Atlantis, that it made us into a multi-traumatized species. And that we have been a multi-traumatized species for the last 12,000 years, and now we're waking up. The world is multidimensional, that beings and spirits and intelligences from other realms are in touch with us. And once that opens up, it doesn't shut down.
Wow. And also we're ending the over 2,000-year age of Pisces, referred to as the age of religion. And now we're in the beginnings of the actual age of Aquarius, not the one talked about in the movie Hair in the 60s. What do we have in store for humanity over the next 2,000 years?
The age of Pisces is the age of organized religion. Each one of the great ages has a central theme that gets developed. So if we go back before the age of Pisces, which started around 100 BC, something like that, if we go back to the previous age, it's the age of Aries. We see the development of organized warfare. And the age of religion, which was the age of Pisces, should have been an enlightened development of spiritual systems on the planet. But unfortunately, the Aryan age wars leaked into the age of Pisces, and the age of Pisces became an age of wars for God. Because as we go into Aquarius, we got to let warfare go. The age of Aquarius is ruled by the planet Uranus, and Uranus is the planet of revolution and transformation. So people change very radically with Uranian influence. And so the trick here is to use our technology for our benefit and not to be used by it. We're right in the middle of that now, and it's a huge, huge challenge, you know. But I believe that we'll get through it, and I believe that it'll end up being a good end result.
Barbara, thank you so very much for